Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're tackling something absolutely massive and honestly incredibly timely. We're diving into billionaire investor Ray Dalio's historical framework for navigating our increasingly chaotic world. Now, if you don't know, Dalio built Bridgewater into the world's largest hedge fund by studying history to predict financial crashes, and he's warning that we are heading into some very, very turbulent times. But hey, don't worry, we aren't just here to talk doom and gloom. We're going to decode the exact patterns of history so you can safeguard your future. So, here's the game plan for today's explainer. We're going to cover 1. The 5 historical forces, 2. The decline of empires, 3. Safeguarding your personal future, 4. Principles for better decisions, and finally, number 5, the ultimate human test. All right, diving right in. Section 1, the telescope, the 5 historical forces. Let's take a macro view here. To truly understand these forces, Dalio essentially pulled out a giant telescope and studied 500 years of history, analyzing major empires from the Dutch to the British. And what he found was that 5 big historical forces interact basically like a chain reaction. First up, there's money and debt. Credit gives us spending power, right? But eventually, the debt outpaces income. When that bill comes due, it squeezes out spending and inflates the second force, internal political conflict. The debt fuels these massive wealth and opportunity gaps, which leads to severe distrust in the system and intense fighting between the political left and right. This internal weakness then invites the third force, geopolitics, which is really just international conflict between a rising power and a declining one. Then there's the fourth force, acts of nature, like droughts and pandemics. Historically, these actually kill way more people than wars do. And finally, number 5 is inventiveness and technology. This is the wild card that can either save an empire or completely accelerate its destruction in a technology war. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the timeline of these forces. Dalio points out that a big historical cycle lasts, on average, about 80 years. It's remarkably similar to a human life cycle. Think about it. Just like a person, an empire is born, it grows, it hits its peak, it ages, and eventually it declines. You might not notice an empire aging day by day, just like you don't look in the mirror and notice yourself aging every single day, but the overarching life arc, it's completely irrefutable. The timeline of the past century brilliantly illustrates exactly where we are on that life arc today. The last big war wrapped up in 1945, and the winners drew the borders and established the new global order. Fast forward a bit. By 1971, Nixon takes the U.S. off the gold standard, which fundamentally changed the nature of money. By 1982, we're seeing a global debt crisis with countries like Mexico defaulting. And today? Well, we're basically 80 years out from the start of this cycle in 1945. We are exhibiting classic late cycle symptoms of an aging world order. Moving on to Section 2, the decline of empires, we're shifting our focus to the present day to look closely at these late-stage symptoms. Dalio identifies very specific, repeating symptoms for late-stage empires. We're seeing incredibly high national debt, intense internal conflict, often visualized as the stark divide between red and blue political poles, and massive wealth inequality, where people just stop trusting that the system actually works for them. And when people lose trust, they stop following the rules, and democracy itself is put at risk as populations start gravitating toward populist leaders. To put this internal decline into perspective, Dalio points out a staggering, honestly kind of shocking statistic. While the top 1 to 10% are doing phenomenally well, 60% of Americans currently read below a 6th grade level. When you lack broad-based education, you lose the broad-based productivity that's absolutely necessary to sustain an empire. We can really see how this builds when we contrast the United States and the United Kingdom. According to Dalio's data, the UK is in a particularly dangerous spot right now. They've got a severe government debt problem, less dynamic capital markets, and they're experiencing a massive millionaire exodus. They're on track to lose roughly 16,000 millionaires this year alone. Now, the U.S. has many of the exact same severe debt and internal conflict issues, but it maintains a powerful, dangerous edge, an incredible culture of inventiveness, and robust capital markets that heavily fund entrepreneurs. But make no mistake, both nations are showing the classic historical signs of late-stage instability. So, looking at all this heavy macroeconomic data, it's super easy to just feel completely overwhelmed, right? Which leads us to the biggest question of this explainer, and it's Dalio's exact question. If the world is declining, how do I, as an individual, handle it? We're pivoting now from the terrifying realities of global empires to the empowering, actionable steps you can actually take right now. And that brings us to Section 3, the microscope, safeguarding your personal future. It's time to talk about protecting you and your family. We're putting the telescope away and we're bringing out the microscope. Dalio anchors his individual survival advice with this really memorable Chinese proverb: a smart rabbit has 3 holes. What this means is that geographic and financial flexibility are your absolute greatest assets in a shifting world order. If things go bad in one location, you need the ability to move yourself and your capital to a better place. Dalio even challenges traditional financial advice here. He points out that aggressively tying up all your capital in a 25-year mortgage might actually severely limit your flexibility if the environment around you deteriorates. Here is Dalio's systematic approach to a successful life during chaotic times. Step 1, build that location flexibility we just talked about. Step 2, secure your financial strength by really mastering how you earn, spend, and save. But step 3, that is where the real magic happens. Dalio emphasizes that once you reach a basic baseline of financial security, more money has almost zero correlation with more happiness. Crazy, right? What actually drives happiness is meaningful work aligned with your passions and meaningful relationships. Studies across literally all societies show that having a strong community is the highest correlate to a long, joyous life. All right, Section 4, Principles for Better Decisions. If you want to navigate the coming volatility and survive the cycle, you must become a radically better decision maker. Take a look at this. It's the absolute cornerstone of Dalio's philosophy. Pain plus reflection equals progress. You cannot avoid pain in the arc of life. It's going to happen. But pain is a message. It's a signal. If you can calm down and take the time to extract lessons from that pain, to really understand how reality actually works, you will generate the principles that drive all personal progress. And Dalio isn't just preaching this from an ivory tower, he literally lived it. In 1979, he correctly predicted that foreign debt would cause a crisis. But when Mexico defaulted in August of 1982, he bet heavily that the economy would crash. Well, he couldn't have been more wrong. That exact moment was the absolute bottom of the stock market. Dalio lost everything. He had to let all his employees go. He was so broke he had to borrow $4,000 from his dad just to pay his family's bills. It was rock bottom. But that catastrophic pain forced him into radical open-mindedness. He stopped trying to just be right all the time, and he started asking the smartest people he knew to ruthlessly stress test his opinions. That humility is exactly what allowed him to rebuild and eventually manage $150 billion. To get that radically open-minded, you have to understand the literal battle going on inside your own head. You've got the conscious mind, which is logical and tries to reason things out, but you also have the subconscious mind, which is emotional, instinctual, and subliminal. Our biggest threat to good decision-making is allowing our ego and those subliminal emotions to hijack our logical intellect. Think about it. When someone disagrees with you, your subconscious often treats it as a physical threat. It initiates a fight or flight response rather than sparking curiosity. So, how do we stop the subconscious from completely hijacking the logical brain? Well, Dalio credits his enormous success to one primary tool: transcendental meditation. By repeating a silent mantra, the sound eventually disappears, and you bypass your conscious thoughts entirely, entering a state where your conscious and subconscious minds perfectly align. Dalio likens it to a ninja in an action movie who sees the whole fight happening in slow motion. It calms the noise, allowing you to become a hyper-realist, even when you're facing deep personal or financial pain. When you achieve that ninja-level serenity, you unlock Dalio's concept of pattern recognition. Instead of seeing this terrifying blizzard of random problems coming at you, you start to see problems as repeating species. You look at a challenge, and you just ask, wait, is it a duck or a lion? Once you identify the species, you instantly know how to react, because you've already written down the principles for dealing with ducks or dealing with lions. It totally removes the panic from the equation. Finally, Section 5, the future, the ultimate human test. We've talked about the past and the present, but what about the AI wildcard that will define the remainder of this cycle? And of course, that wildcard is artificial intelligence. Dalio makes a truly fascinating historical comparison here. In the Industrial Revolution, machines replaced human muscle and physical labor. Think tractors replacing oxen, right? But in the AI revolution, we are creating technology that actually replaces human intelligence and decision-making. Dalio warns that this era will create unprecedented leverage for a tiny percentage of winners who know how to harness it, but it's going to replace the intellectual labor of many. It's going to fundamentally disrupt our society and create even greater polarity. Which brings us to our final, really provocative thought. Dalio notes that while intelligence and technology are powerful, nearly all species come and go, and our survival rarely depends on tech alone. It depends on human nature. In a world of extreme geopolitical tension, changing world orders, and hyper-advanced AI, the ultimate test is this: can we rise above our instinctual greed and actually embrace the collective good? Because ultimately, our spiritual ability to foster win-win relationships, to genuinely help each other and build strong communities, will decide if we successfully survive this changing world order. It's something to think deeply about as you prepare for the future. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.